We lost our home and lived in our car. I thought things couldn't get worse until I found out why my dad was really hiding. You ever wonder how a person ends up living in a car with their whole family? I used to ask myself that all the time. When I was 15, my world flipped upside down, and suddenly, the back seat of a beat-up '98 Honda Civic became my bedroom. Not because we were on the run or anything wild like that, but because life just fell apart, one piece at a time. My name's Evan, and I grew up in a quiet little town in Missouri. We weren't rich, but we got by. Mom worked double shifts at a diner, and Dad worked construction, until he didn't. One day, he just stopped going. No explanation, no injury, nothing. Said the boss had it out for him. After that, bills started piling up like autumn leaves. Rent was late, lights flickered off, and food got real creative. Think canned beans with crushed crackers for dinner. At first, I thought things would bounce back. I mean, my dad was a tough guy, built like a truck, always had grease under his nails. But instead of finding a new job, he spent his days in front of the TV, nursing cheap beers and barking at anyone who asked too many questions. Mom tried to hold things together, but I saw the stress eating her alive. Her hair started graying early, and her smile faded little by little. The eviction notice hit like a brick. I still remember the cold slap of reality reading that taped-up letter on our door. I was just a kid, but I knew what it meant. We packed what we could, mostly clothes, old photos, and a box of my little sister's toys. Everything else stayed behind. It was like walking out of our lives and into someone else's. Sleeping in the car was rough. At first, we stayed in parking lots behind fast food joints or rest stops off the highway. Mom would sneak into bathrooms to wash up, and my sister and I would pretend we were camping, just to keep things light. But the truth was, we were broke. Not tight on cash broke. I mean dead broke, empty tank, digging in the seats for change kind of broke. School was the only normal thing left, but even that got tricky. I didn't have clean clothes some days, and showering became a luxury. I got good at hiding the truth. Told my friends we were between places, or helping relatives. Anything but the truth. I was too proud, and too scared, to say we were homeless. And then came the biggest surprise, Grandma. She hadn't spoken to my dad in years. Something about a fight over money back when I was little. But one afternoon, as we were parked behind a gas station in the rain, Mom got a call. Her face went pale. Without saying a word, she handed the phone to Dad. I'd never seen him go so quiet so fast. The next day, we drove 4 hours to some small town I'd never even heard of. Turns out, Grandma had agreed to let us stay for 1 week. That was the deal. No arguments, no drama, just 1 week to figure it out. We slept in her basement, all 4 of us on air mattresses surrounded by boxes of old books and Christmas decorations. It felt like heaven. But that's when the question started. Why had my dad cut ties with his own mother? Why did he refuse to talk about his past? And what was the real reason we lost our home? The first twist came when I found an old photo album buried in one of Grandma's boxes. It had pictures of my dad when he was a teenager, smiling, wearing a school football uniform, standing next to a shiny red pickup. He looked happy, way happier than I'd ever seen him. I asked Grandma about it, and that's when she dropped the first bombshell. He was supposed to go to college, she said, her voice cracking a little. Full ride. Football scholarship. I blinked. What happened? She paused. He threw it all away. But she wouldn't say how. Not yet. That night, I stared at my dad across the dinner table, watching him poke at his food like it had done something wrong. For years, I believed he just got unlucky, lost a job, had trouble bouncing back. But now I wasn't so sure. Something deeper was going on, something hidden beneath years of silence and pride. The next twist came from my little sister, Katie. She was only 9, but she was sharp. One evening, while I was helping her with homework, she said something that chilled me. Daddy used to hide money in the cereal box. I laughed, thinking she was making it up. What do you mean? He said it was for emergencies. But I saw him take it out at night. I couldn't shake that. Why would he stash money in a cereal box? And more importantly, what happened to it? I waited until the house was quiet. Then I went downstairs and checked the pantry. There was no cereal anymore, just a few dusty cans. But in the back, tucked behind a box of expired oats, I found something. An old envelope. Empty. Just enough of a clue to know she hadn't made it up. The next day, I asked Mom straight up, did Dad ever have money hidden somewhere? She hesitated. Once, but it's gone now. Let it go, Evan. But I couldn't. Because the more I looked, the more cracks I saw in my parents' story. And the deeper I dug, the more I started to realize. We didn't lose everything because of bad luck. We lost everything because of a secret. I couldn't sleep that night. I just lay there in the basement, staring at the wooden beams above me, wondering how much of my life had been built on half-truths. What else didn't I know? Grandma could tell something was bothering me the next morning. While everyone else was upstairs, she handed me a cup of tea and asked if I wanted to talk. I didn't plan to spill everything, but the words just came out. I told her about the cereal box, about the eviction, and how things never added up. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, Your father made mistakes, Evan. Big ones. But they didn't start with losing his job. I leaned in. What happened? She looked down at her hands. It started when he met Ray. Ray? I didn't even recognize the name. She sighed. They were friends in high school. Got mixed up in things they shouldn't have. Your dad was always strong, always smart, but Ray was trouble from day one. After the scholarship offer came in, Ray talked him into skipping practice, partying, even skipping classes. One day, they were caught with stolen car parts. Felony charges were on the table. My heart sank. He was 17, Grandma said, wiping a tear away. And just like that, everything he worked for disappeared. I sat there stunned. I'd always thought of my dad as someone who'd had bad luck. But this wasn't bad luck. This was sabotage, self-inflicted and never talked about. And after that, I asked. He drifted. Tried a few jobs, got into fights. We fought too. He blamed me for everything, said I pushed him too hard. Then he left and didn't speak to me for nearly 20 years. So that was the crack in our family tree. A secret buried so deep no one wanted to touch it. But if that had been it, just a mistake from his youth, I might have been able to understand. Forgive, even. But something still didn't sit right with me. A few days later, while Grandma was at the store and Dad had taken Katie to the park, I went snooping. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. I searched through some of Dad's old bags we'd brought from the car. That's when I found it. A folded piece of notebook paper shoved into an old glove compartment manual. It was a handwritten note. Ray needs his cut. Don't make me call again. No signature. No date. Just those words in thick, messy handwriting. My stomach dropped. So Ray wasn't just some old high school friend. He was still around. Still involved. And apparently, still expecting money. I showed it to Mom that night. Her face drained of color. She didn't say a word, just walked out of the room. When she came back, she sat down beside me and finally opened up. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't think you'd understand. Your father, he's been sending money to Ray for years. Not because he wants to. Because he has to. Why? I asked. What does Ray have on him? She shook her head. I don't know everything. But whatever it is, it's bad. Real bad. And that's when it all started to make sense. The missing money. The sudden job loss. The hiding and lying. Ray was blackmailing him. And my dad, too ashamed to ask for help, just kept paying. Even if it meant dragging us all down with him. That night, I lay awake thinking about Katie. About how she didn't know any of this. To her, Dad was still the guy who made silly voices and fixed her toys. I couldn't stand the thought of her finding out like I did. The next day, I made a decision. If my dad wasn't going to protect us from Ray, I would. I had no plan. No clue what I was doing. But I started by asking Grandma if she remembered Ray's last name. She did. Ray Wilkins, she said with a bitter look. I always knew he'd be trouble. With that, I went to the local library and used one of their old computers to look him up. Took a while, but I found a listing. Ray Wilkins, same age as my dad, lived about 2 towns over. I got the address, wrote it down, and stuffed it in my pocket. Was I really going to confront this guy? Honestly, I didn't know, but I felt like I had to do something. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. That evening, I watched Dad sitting on the porch, smoking a cigarette with a faraway look in his eyes. I sat next to him, handed him the folded note I'd found, and said, I know about Ray. He didn't flinch, didn't get mad, just took a long drag and let the smoke out slow. I thought I could handle it, he finally said. Thought I could keep it from you. From your sister. But the truth has a way of leaking out. What does he have on you? I asked quietly. Dad hesitated. Then he looked me dead in the eye. He helped me after I got out of jail. Loaned me money, gave me work. But he kept track. And when I couldn't pay him back, he started demanding things. Favors. Money. Said if I didn't, he'd go to the cops and tell them about some of the things we did back then. Stuff they never caught us for. I could see the guilt eating at him. And for the first time in a long time, I saw him not as the guy who failed us, but as someone who got trapped and didn't know how to get out. I want to fix this, he said, his voice shaking. But I don't know how. That's when I told him I had Ray's address. At first, he got mad. Said I should have stayed out of it. But then, after a long silence, he nodded. Maybe it's time I stop running. We didn't leave right away. Dad sat on that porch for a long time, watching the sun dip behind the trees, cigarette burning down to the filter. I thought maybe he'd changed his mind. But when morning came, he was already dressed, keys in hand, and told me to get in the car. I didn't know what we were walking into. The drive to Ray's place was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the hum of the tires and my own heart pounding in my ears. Every so often, Dad would glance at me like he wanted to say something, but the words just stayed stuck in his throat. When we pulled up, I almost laughed. I guess I expected some big scary mansion or a rundown shack in the woods. Instead, it was just a regular house on a regular street, with patchy grass and a dented mailbox. The only thing off was the motorcycle parked out front. Matte black. No plates. Dad told me to stay in the car. Of course, I didn't listen. He knocked, and a man opened the door a few seconds later. Bald, heavy-set, with a jaw like a cinder block. His eyes flicked to me, Then back to Dad. You brought the kid? I didn't bring him, Dad said. He followed me. Ray stepped outside, arms crossed, clearly annoyed. So what now? You come to confess? Apologize? I got no use for that. Dad didn't flinch. I'm done paying you. Ray scoffed. You think it works like that? You think you get to just walk away? I've got nothing left to give, Dad said. I'm living in a basement. My kids sleep on the floor. You want money? Go find someone else. I expected yelling. A fight. Maybe even a punch thrown. But Ray just laughed. Cold and dry. Then he leaned in and said something I'll never forget. You think I care about the money? This was never about that. This is about making you squirm. You turned your back on me. Left me holding the bag. Dad's face turned to stone. Because what you were doing was wrong. It was always wrong. Ray stepped closer, eyes burning. And you were right there with me. Don't forget that. You don't get to play the hero now. Something shifted in Dad's face then. Like he'd finally hit a wall he couldn't back away from. He straightened his shoulders, clenched his fists, and said quietly, Then do what you have to. But I'm done being scared of you. Ray didn't say a word. Just slammed the door in our faces. We stood there for a moment, the sound echoing in our ears. Then Dad turned to me, gave me a look I didn't quite understand, and walked back to the car. We didn't talk much on the ride home. He didn't say he felt better. Didn't say he was proud of standing up for himself. But I could see it. The tension in his jaw was gone. His shoulders weren't slumped anymore. For the first time in years, he looked like he could breathe. When we got back, Mom was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed, worry all over her face. Dad walked up, pulled her into a hug, and said, It's over. She didn't ask questions. Just held him like she'd been waiting for that moment forever. But I wasn't convinced it was over. Not yet. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. Dad started helping Grandma around the house. He found a temp job at a warehouse across town. Even started laughing again. It felt like we were slowly climbing out of the hole. Then Ray showed up. I was outside helping Katie fix the chain on her bike when a black motorcycle rolled up to the curb. I froze. So did she. Ray didn't say a word. Just stared at us for a few seconds, then revved the engine and sped off. I ran inside, told Dad, and watched the blood drain from his face. He came here. Didn't say anything. Just watched. That night, Dad didn't sleep. He sat in the living room, staring at the front door like it might blow open any second. I hated it. I hated seeing him scared again. I hated how one man could hold that much power over him. So the next day, I made another decision. If Dad couldn't stop Ray, maybe I could. It was a dumb idea. I know that now. But back then, I felt like I had to do something. I went back to the library and started digging deeper into Ray Wilkins. And that's when I found it. A news article buried deep in the archives. It was a report from 5 years earlier. Ray had been a suspect in a warehouse robbery, tied to a group of people stealing equipment and selling it off. Charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. But what caught my eye was the name of the company. Evergreen Construction Supplies. That was the same company where Dad used to work. I printed the article and ran it home. When I showed it to Dad, his hands started shaking. I told him about that place, he said quietly. Told him the security was light. I thought we were just going to steal some scrap. I didn't know he'd take it that far. So that was it. Dad had helped set up the robbery. Even if he didn't go through with it, even if he didn't benefit from it, Ray had enough to keep him under his thumb forever. Why didn't you come forward? I asked. Because I was scared, he admitted. And because I knew if I got locked up again, I'd lose you all. I looked at him, this man who'd made 100 mistakes, but was trying so hard to fix even one. And I made up my mind. We have to tell someone. He nodded slowly. Yeah, we do. Telling the truth sounds simple until you're staring it in the face. Dad sat at the kitchen table that night with the printed article in front of him. He read it over and over like it might change the more he looked at it. Grandma, who'd been doing dishes, turned off the faucet and quietly sat down beside him. Nobody said anything for a while. Finally, she asked, What are you planning to do? He rubbed his face and let out a deep breath. Turn myself in. Mom gasped. Are you serious? I can't keep living like this, he said, looking over my shoulder, waiting for Ray to show up. I won't put you or the kids through that anymore. It hit me then that this wasn't just about right and wrong. This was about finally taking responsibility, something he'd run from for years. The next morning, we went to the local sheriff's office. I stayed in the car, but I saw the way he stood, back straight, hands in his pockets, like a man walking into a storm. When he came back out, he looked different, not defeated, not afraid, just calm. They're gonna look into it, he said. Said they can't promise anything. Too much time's passed, but they'll open a file. What if Ray finds out? Dad shrugged. Let him. For a few days, things were quiet again. Grandma made casseroles like she used to. Katie went back to reading books on the living room floor, and I started helping Dad with small jobs, painting fences, mowing lawns, whatever we could find. But of course, peace never lasts long when you're trying to outrun the past. It happened on a Friday. I was walking home from school, headphones in, sun just starting to set. I turned onto our street, and saw the motorcycle again, parked right in front of our house. Ray was standing on the porch. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. He was just standing there, arms crossed, looking like he owned the place. I froze halfway down the sidewalk, my heart thudding so hard I could barely hear my music. Dad opened the door before I could even react. And this time, he didn't flinch. "I know what you did," Ray said. "You went to the cops." Dad didn't deny it. "It's over." Ray stepped closer. "You think they'll believe you over me? There's no proof. It's your word against mine." Dad stood firm. "Then let it be." Ray glanced at me, standing a few feet away, and sneered. "You raised a little rat, huh? Following in your footsteps?" That's when I lost it. I marched up the steps and got right in his face. "Leave. Now." He smirked like I was just a joke. Or what? Before I could say anything, Dad stepped between us. "You don't want to test him? Or me?" Ray looked at us both, shook his head, then slowly turned and walked away. Not a word. Just climbed on his bike, revved the engine, and tore down the road. We watched until the taillights disappeared. After that, things moved fast. The sheriff called back a few days later. Said they'd opened a formal investigation and were interviewing people who used to work at Evergreen. Dad gave a full statement, every detail he remembered. It felt like he was finally breaking free, cutting the last thread that Ray had held over him. And then the unexpected happened. A former employee came forward. Said he'd been part of the job too, but Ray had threatened him into silence. Gave a statement that matched Dad's almost exactly. That was the break the sheriff's office needed. They reopened the old case officially. Ray got picked up the next week, charged with multiple counts related to the robbery, plus witness intimidation. I didn't see him again after that, but part of me still jumps every time I hear a motorcycle engine. For the first time in years, our family started to heal. We moved out of Grandma's basement a few months later. Nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Dad kept working whatever jobs he could find, and eventually landed something steady at a repair shop. Mom picked up extra shifts at a local cafe, and I got a part-time job after school stocking shelves. It wasn't easy. We didn't suddenly become some happy, shiny postcard family. There were still arguments. Still long nights when the fridge was a little too empty. But we were moving forward. Together. And Dad, he changed. He didn't drink as much. He showed up. He apologized when he messed up. He didn't pretend to be perfect, just better than before. And honestly, that was enough for me. One night, maybe 6 months after Ray got locked up, Dad knocked on my bedroom door. He didn't usually do that. He handed me a small box. Inside was the old photo of him in his football jersey, creased at the edges, but still bright. "I used to hate this picture," he said. "Thought it was a reminder of what I lost. But now, I think it's a reminder of what I almost became. And how lucky I am that I didn't stay that way." I didn't say much. Just nodded. Because in that moment, I understood. Sometimes it's not about fixing everything. Sometimes it's just about finally choosing the right road after 100 wrong turns. You'd think after everything that happened, we'd get a break. Some peace. And for a while, we did. Dad kept showing up. Katie started acting like a regular kid again, drawing pictures, playing outside, laughing more. Mom and Grandma weren't tiptoeing around each other anymore. We even started doing Sunday dinners together. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread, but it felt like family again. I was 17 now, a year away from graduation. I kept my grades up, kept working part-time, and I started thinking maybe, just maybe, there was something more out there for me. A future I could actually reach. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It started small. Dad came home late one night, limping. Said he twisted his ankle lifting something heavy at work. Didn't want to go to the doctor. Said it'd heal. Then came the headaches. The dizziness. The days when he couldn't even get out of bed. He tried to hide it, but we all saw. Mom finally dragged him to the clinic. They ran a bunch of tests, told him to come back in a week for results. He brushed it off like it was no big deal. But it was. The diagnosis hit us like a freight train. Early onset Parkinson's. I didn't even fully understand what that meant at first. I thought Parkinson's was something old folks got. Something slow, manageable. But the doctor explained that in some cases, it hits younger, hits harder, and hits fast. Dad was 42. At first, he tried to act like it didn't matter. Said he'd keep working, keep pushing through. But the tremors came quickly. His hands started shaking at dinner. He dropped tools at work. His boss had no choice but to let him go. It felt cruel. Like after everything. After finally doing the right thing. After dragging himself out of that hole. Life reached up and yanked the rug out from under him again. We adjusted as best we could. Mom picked up more hours. I took on extra shifts too. Grandma helped where she could, though her own health wasn't perfect either. Katie didn't fully understand, but she was old enough to notice. She started watching cartoons with the sound off, just to make sure Dad could nap without being disturbed. The worst part wasn't the shaking. It was watching the strongest man I knew slowly lose control over his own body. One night, I found him sitting on the bathroom floor. He'd tried to shave and dropped the razor. Just sat there, staring at the tile. "I used to be able to lift engine blocks," he whispered. "Now I can't even hold a toothbrush." I sat down next to him, put my arm around his shoulder, and said, "You're still my dad." He didn't respond, but he leaned into me just a little. We started researching treatment options. Meds could slow it down, help with symptoms, but they weren't cheap. Insurance barely covered anything. We applied for every assistance program we could find, but most came with long wait lists and mountains of paperwork. And then, out of nowhere, a letter came in the mail. It was from a lawyer. I thought maybe it was another bill, or something left over from the whole Ray situation. But it wasn't. It was a notice from the estate of George P. Wilkins, Ray's father. Apparently, George had passed away a few months after Ray was arrested. No will, no heirs, no known family besides Ray, who was now serving a sentence and couldn't inherit, which meant the state was looking into next of kin. And somehow, they traced it back to us. Ray and Dad had been listed as non-biological dependents on a shared legal document from decades earlier. Some weird technicality from when they lived together under a guardian's care as teens. The lawyer said there was a slim chance Dad might be eligible to claim part of the estate. At first, Dad wanted nothing to do with it. "I don't want a cent of that man's money," he said flatly. But Mom and Grandma convinced him to at least let the lawyer do the paperwork. "What if it helps cover medicine? Or food?" Grandma said. It took months. Back and forth documents. Proof of identity. More paperwork than you'd believe. But then one day, a check showed up. Not millions. Nothing life-changing. But enough. Enough to pay down our debts. Enough to finally get Dad the meds he needed. Enough to give us a cushion for once in our lives. I remember holding that check and just staring at it, thinking about everything that led to that moment. All the pain. All the secrets. All the nights we spent curled up in the back seat of that old Civic. And now, we had a shot. Not a guarantee. Not a miracle. Just a real, honest shot. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. It wasn't like the check solved all our problems overnight. But it gave us space to breathe, and that was something we hadn't had in years. Dad started his new treatment. The medicine didn't cure anything, but it helped. The tremors slowed down a little, and he could hold his coffee mug again without spilling it. He even started working part-time at a small auto shop. Nothing heavy, just diagnostics and light repairs. The owner was kind enough to let him work on good days and rest when he needed. Mom, for the first time in what felt like forever, wasn't working double shifts. She got promoted to supervisor at the cafe and even picked up a hobby, crocheting. She was terrible at first, but she stuck with it, and soon she had Katie wearing little handmade hats with lopsided flowers on top. Grandma's health started to slip not long after. Quietly. She didn't want to make a big deal about it. But one morning, she asked Dad to bring her to the old church down the road, the one she hadn't set foot in for years. They sat in the back pew for nearly an hour. Just the two of them. She said she needed to talk to someone. Not the priest. Just someone. She passed away in her sleep 2 weeks later. We held the service in that same church. Small and simple, the way she would have wanted it. Afterward, we had spaghetti and garlic bread at home, like our old Sunday dinners. It felt right. Losing her hurt, but it didn't tear us apart. We leaned on each other. We were stronger now, scarred, but solid. As for me, I graduated the next spring. I walked across that stage in a cap and gown that didn't quite fit, and I looked out to see Dad standing with Katie on his shoulders, Mom wiping tears off her cheeks, and an empty seat where Grandma should have been. That summer, I got accepted to a local community college. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I planned to study electrical repair, something practical, something I could use to help keep our family steady. The day before classes started, Dad pulled me aside. He looked tired, but proud. His hand was shaking a little, but he still managed to place something into mine. It was a key. "To the Civic," he said. "She still runs. Thought you could use a way to get to class." I smiled, more than a little choked up. "She's still alive?" "Barely," he said, laughing. "But she's yours now. That car had once been our shelter, our bedroom, our everything. And now it was my way forward." A week later, I was heading home from night classes, driving that old Civic with the windows down and the radio humming, when I hit a red light at the edge of town. I looked over and saw another car pull up. New, shiny, everything ours wasn't. Inside was a guy about my age. Clean clothes. Brand new phone in his lap. And for a second, I felt that familiar tug of envy. But then I looked at my dashboard, cracked and dusty, and thought about everything it had seen. Everything I'd survived. I smiled. Because that car didn't just take me places. It carried a story. A story of broken beginnings, second chances, and quiet strength. People talk a lot about what defines success. Money, careers, big houses with wraparound porches. But for me, it's different. Success is seeing my sister wake up every morning without fear in her eyes. It's watching my mom hum while she folds laundry, knowing we've got a roof over our heads. It's hearing Dad laugh again, even if it's just once in a while. And most of all, it's knowing that no matter how dark things get, there's always a road back to the light. You just have to take that first step, even if it's in a rusty old Civic.